Everybody's ready. I think we're gonna get started here. Besides everybody we have in this room, you can see we've got some people on Zoom with us. So I just want to start with telling you that I'm Karen Gray. I'm the director and president of Wildlands Trust, and we are delighted to host this program here this evening. I was visiting with Glorianna probably back in early January. We were having tea or wine, I don't remember, but one or the other at my house. And I started asking her about what was going on at Living Observatory, and I just couldn't believe it. I felt so just privileged that we had this, the roots of it in Plymouth. And I said, you really have to come and present in the Wildlands Barn so that the community can understand what we have. This is really something, and it's so important, not just to Plymouth, but to all of southeastern Massachusetts, where we're looking at really big turnovers of cranberry bogs. So she's here tonight, and I want to tell you, introducing Glorianna, I just had one thing to say about her, and it has nothing to do with what she's done in her life, and it has everything to do with who she is as a person. And I'm going to tell you, she's truly a visionary. She's a visionary. She sees things that other people don't see, and she figures out how to get them done. And we're fortunate to have both Glorianna and Evan here in our community, working on behalf of all of us in Plymouth. So with that, you're up.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh, wow. First of all, thank everybody who came here. It's not like a wonderful day to come, but it's not as bad as driving in 18 inches of snow, I suppose. And greetings to everyone online. This is one of my favorite places in Plymouth, this barn, and it's a real privilege to be here. And thank you, Karen, for encouraging me to get off my seat, get moving. So I wanted to tell you tonight a little bit about Living Observatory, a little bit about how we started, and what the cranberry situation is really in brief, and then what we do now. And I will be then turning over the program to my colleague Brian Mayton, who's sitting here, who got his PhD from MIT in 2020 and did a lot of work as part of his PhD on Tidmarsh Farms, which was Evan's cranberry bog that we put into restoration. And Adrian Wiegman, who joined us in 2025 to be our learning coordinator. And so it's really a sort of a big jump from being one person doing Living Observatory to being three people. I'm sure Karen can appreciate this because she, so let me see if I can do this. You don't have to read anything, and I'll actually go, if I can, to, okay. So Living Observatory started when Evan and I were trying to figure out how to put Tidmarsh and what became Foothills Preserve into conservation and restoration. And we had already made some progress on that, but restoration of a large property is a big undertaking. It costs a lot of money, and you have to make a lot of decisions. At the time, Eel River had just been restored. We were very lucky to be able to go there and see what was happening. And I knew that it would take a lot of public money to do this, and I thought there might be something we could give back. I was a founding member at the Media Lab, so I grew up is maybe a weird word, but in an environment where we started with about 20 faculty and moved up to about 30 faculty in my time. Faculty were able to admit their own students, which is very unusual in university settings. And every faculty had a different specialty, which meant that while I couldn't understand what one of my colleagues might be doing in detail, the students learned from each other. And the fact that I could admit students who wanted to make movies and build digital systems, that those students mixed with people from Joe Paradiso's group who wanted to build sensor systems was really important. So when I had this idea for Living Observatory, I wanted to build a learning collaborative where we'd have many different disciplines and the young folk would learn from each other and we'd figure out how to measure whether the restoration worked. Was the result of the restoration what we wanted it to be? And at the time, Joe Paradiso's gang was building something called Double Lab. And well, might not be able to play it here, but let's see. Let's see what I can. Okay, so I'm not going to play this for very long, but what you can see is it's the outline of the building. It's a 3D version of the building, and it has some big objects in it that are turning red and blue. And then it will have some other objects of things moving around. And this was representing what his group had done was taken all the things that had sensors, like your HVAC and like your cell phone. And they were making a version of the building that showed what was changing. Like if it was getting cold in one area or hot in one area, and if a lot of people were going from one floor to another. And this was amazing. You can't do that in a movie. You know, in a movie, you have to do scenes and stage that all. So that was very exciting. The thing was, he was in a rectangular building, and it's fairly easy to put sensors in a rectangular building, but we were dealing with outside. So I asked Joe, would he like to move up to a new challenge? And he had a student who was just coming off a master's, Gershon Dublin, who was sort of the first person who joined Living Observatory and started to think what a sensor network would look like on a large property. Brian was the second student who joined that, and he actually built the sensor network for Living Observatory, which included cameras, environmental sensing, all kinds of magic stuff. And so then I realized that we needed people who understood water and soils and vegetation. And so I went with Alex Hackman, who was the person from the Division of Ecological Restoration, who was helping us run the project. I went to U of Mass Amherst, and we got a hydrologist who really wanted to work with us. And that was fantastic because he introduced us to all different kinds of faculty afterward, and we began wetlands, the three sort of most obvious or most telling aspects: hydrology, soils, do the soils have wetland function, and vegetation, which shows you sort of whether there's moisture or not moisture in the soils. So we started to put together this crazy team. And sorry, Brian built this beautifully, but I have a, okay. So I have sort of one message of this whole thing is why it matters. We have lots of cranberry bogs, as Karen was saying, going out of production. We have a lot of old cranberry bogs that are lying around here and there. If those are not restored, they don't acquire wetland function because there's a lot of sand on those bogs, 2 feet, let's say, across the whole thing. So the part of the bog that's raised looks more like an upland forest. And then it has some ditches running through it. And just broadly, that's why we really want to restore these farms, because we want wetland function because that's has some characteristics that will be really helpful going forward. And so my two takeaways are, if you don't protect it, if we don't protect these farms, we'll lose them. You have only to drive down 3A to see that. And Ryan, could you fix this for me? And the second thing is to just note that Living Observatory, by measuring soils, was able to say that the difference between not restoring and restoring is dramatic. If you restore, you may get sort of 85% wetland function in 50 years. If you don't restore, you might get 18% wetland function or less in 100 years. So the difference is dramatic. And what you want is that wetland function. Thank you. Move down. So that was research that was done by Kate Ballantyne, who was on our faculty. She was Mount Holyoke faculty, but she was a very early member of Living Observatory. And the last thing I want to say is it takes a lot of partners to make these restorations happen. They're very expensive. There are a lot of different specialties. The Division of Ecological Restoration was fantastic about helping us. Let's get to that picture. I wanted to show you a picture that was taken by Carol Hubbard's son, Eric Heller. It was the first drone flight we flew over after the excavators left Tidmarsh. And what it shows you is you can see all the large wood piles that exist. And this was an area where we had left some vegetation. And drone imagery is fantastic. We should be using it more, but nobody will pay for it. So problems. Yeah.
The people on the Zoom are having a hard time when you walk away from the computer.
Okay. Okay. Do you want me to just get to the last page? Okay. I'm going to end just saying what we do now and then let our friends take it away. So, we now provide a place, what we'd like to do is make a place where all the information about Cranberry Farm restoration can be in one place, where you can get to data about it, where you can get to the story. Karen Beatty is in the room. She just did a fabulous restoration on Nantucket. We have lessons from Nantucket, and if you don't write those lessons down, you walk away and the next person doesn't know that you made that decision and doesn't have the benefit. So we're trying to build this kind of learning platform where these stories get collected, and it's the members of the community, of our community, of the restoration community that is building those stories. It's not one person, it's not a web guru. However, we do have a web guru who is helping. We want to monitor wetland restoration. We want to find out how long it really takes for these projects for wetland function to evolve, because it takes time. We want to use this knowledge that's gained to make wetland restoration cheaper, more efficient, better. We want to develop activities that can help bring the learning culture to complex projects. These are very complex. There are, teams of 20 to 30 people who maybe come together, of key leader people who come together for a very short time and have to decide, should this stream, what should happen with this stream? What should happen with this surface? How deep should we make it microtopography? And we want to develop programs and projects such as sensor networks on projects to help the public and everybody else appreciate how ecology is changing. Just move down. So many people in our community have helped support us. You can't do this type of work without some support. But I want to give one shout out to Goldenrod Foundation, which is now a defunct foundation, but was very important in Plymouth, if you've never heard of it, getting four-wheel drives to not drive on beaches. And when they dissolved, they divided those assets between, I think, 4 entities. We were a very small nonprofit, the smallest of those entities. And as a result, we were able to bring in Adrian. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brian, and I'm sorry I took a little too much time, but that's how it goes.
All right, so as Glorianna introduced me, I'm Brian Mayton, and I'm going to be taking you through what I've been building with Living Observatory over the last 5 or 6 years. I want to point out that this is all online, so you can feel free to explore this yourself later tonight or at your leisure. This is at projects.livingobservatory.org, or feel free to scan the QR code with your phone. I will also have the URL at the end of the talk. So before we get into what's really new, I wanted to start by talking about some of what led me to where we are today, and my experiences from my time at the MIT Media Lab that influenced what we've built and how these tools work. And I want to highlight that this platform that we're building to collect and share and engage with the community is entirely custom software. This isn't something that we've gone and bought. This is developed in close collaboration with all of our members to really meet the needs of the wetland restoration community here in southeastern Massachusetts. And in doing that, we hope to be able to learn from what we're doing, share that knowledge, be able to more effectively restore more land, protect more land, and create new opportunities to engage with the public. So 2 of the really big inspirations for me in taking on this platform were, one were the Living Observatory summits that we held regularly in the pre-COVID era, starting at Tidmarsh Farms at the very beginning of the restoration. We got a collection of experts that became the members of Living Observatory together in Glorianna's house and talked about what we were going to do, how this restoration was going to proceed, and what we were interested in. That trend continued as the project took off, and we would meet yearly at the MIT Media Lab, and everyone would present their work, talk about what they were doing, what they were excited about. And it was just this really great opportunity to get all these experts together, learn from each other. And I wanted a way to keep that going in between these events so that it wasn't just this punctuated thing. The other thing is a couple of years ago, we got together and authored this report titled Learning from the Restoration of Wetlands on Cranberry Farming, on cranberry farmland. And it's a really great document that kind of summarizes a lot of what we've learned so far, a lot of what we think best practice is. And I kind of wanted to make this an evolving document. So it wasn't just this book that you can read through, but that it is this platform that you can explore through, see what's changing, see how things develop as we learn. Of course, much of this is heavily driven by my own learnings from trying to build sensor networks at Tidmarsh, using technology as a way of automatically monitoring the landscape as it changed. So these are a couple of my sensor devices out in the field, which of course generates lots of data that needs to be archived in order to be useful. Of course, at the MIT Media Lab, we tend to do things that aren't always the most conventional. So we spent a lot of time exploring how we can use multimedia technologies like live audio and video to capture this process. So multiple cameras that we have permanently installed out there, multiple microphones. And one way that you can see this is this is a half-hour film that I put together from time-lapse footage and recorded audio, real motion footage that takes you through about a 5-year period, starting before the restoration, going through the work on the ground, and into the post-restoration. So that's online if you want to watch that later. We also have live cameras that stream to the internet 24/7. So at least when the weather is cooperating and we have enough sun on our solar panels, you can tune in and get a live view, and maybe you'll get lucky and see some wildlife coming through. It's really fun to just have on in the background. So those are some of the things that we like to play with. Getting back to data a little bit, as I mentioned with my own sensor network, I was generating lots and lots of sensor data, especially soil moisture data. So I was playing around with building different tools for documenting that, storing and presenting that data. And this is one of the interfaces I put together. And one thing that I found really invaluable was having an easy way to take data like this. I'm not an ecologist by training. I'm an electrical engineer. So in trying to make sense of what I was seeing on the soil moisture data, I was able to send links to this to Christine Hatch, one of my collaborators. And she is a hydrologist. She knows this stuff inside and out, and was able to go on and on the software that I built, add her own comments about what we were seeing. So that was something that I wanted to have in the Living Observatory platform as this developed. And then lastly, Glorianna showed Doppel. Well, we went and did the same thing for Tidmarsh fairly early on. So this is a 3D version, and you can kind of look at it through different lenses, where you're either seeing a really natural view or you're accentuating the sensor data to see this virtual landscape that's actually being driven in real time by actual data that's coming from it. So having ways to experiment with not just looking at things in tables and graphs, but really experiential ways of interacting with it. So that leads us into the Living Observatory community platform, which is the software that I've been building since I finished my time at the Media Lab and have moved to working directly with Living Observatory most of the time. So one of the first steps was getting all of our community members on the platform. So we invited people to join. People get to, when they join, they show up on our people page and have the opportunity to put together their own profile that explains the research that they're doing, what their interests are. And this is also a hub where you can see all of the different projects that they're involved in. One of the common themes in this website is that everything is very closely hyperlinked. So everything that's related to each other. And as we've seen, these restorations are complicated. They involve lots and lots of different things, lots of different people, lots of different partners. So my goal here is to be able to connect all of the appropriate resources together so you can really explore. The core element of the platform really, though, are projects. So you can browse through our list of projects. Everything from actual restoration projects that are documented here to my sensor network, to different things that people are doing to reflect on what they're seeing. So each project gets to have its own page that explains what it's doing, who's working on it. It can link to important files, such as the research proposal that led to it. And then going back to what I thought was so neat about those summits is projects have basically a blog where they can post updates. So when somebody has a new finding, something that they find interesting, they can post that as an update. So for example, here I was installing a new air quality monitoring sensor out at Tidmarsh and just put together a quick little post on that. And all of these updates show up on the main homepage. So you can go on here and scroll through and see what's been happening for the last several months. Up at the top right now, we've got an update talking about this presentation. So again, really trying to keep the site alive with activity in the community. As another example of an update, our herring monitoring project is very active in the springtime, and we're looking for volunteers for the herring counts. So there's a page on here with lots more information if that's something that you might be interested in helping with. And this links to all of the different training sessions that you can sign up for. And that kind of brings us to data. So we have a big team of experts, big team of researchers that are generating data. And one thing that we've noticed is that all of this data is very closely tied to locations. We have different properties, and then we have monitoring plots within those properties. We have transects, and it's important to be able to document where those locations are. And those locations serve as kind of one of the key ways that you navigate through this data. So as a core feature of the software, there's a big geotagged database of locations that data then gets attached to. So as an example, this is the Upper Coonamessett site, and you can see all of the locations that we're doing more specific monitoring. Each one of these locations has what we call the notebook, which is a way for researchers to record observations. So if I go to the Upper Coonamessett site, we've just been recently last fall installing a set of soil moisture sensors here that we're using to help track Atlantic white cedar plantings and monitor the soil moisture at these different planting locations. And in the notebook here, we were able to record when and where the sensors were installed, what the serial numbers of the sensors were. So we have a record to contextualize the data. So when we go back and look at it, we know that on the 26th of August, we put in sensors at 5 and 15 centimeters at this particular location. In addition to that notebook, there's also what we call the photo stream. So these are all of the photos that are currently associated with the Upper Coonamessett site. And most of these right now are photos from that sensor installation. So you can go to one of these and be able to see that this looks like this is pretty sandy soil that these sensor probes are installed in. So later on, 2 years later, when we're looking back at this data and trying to make sense of it, we have all of this information that we can reference. And the photos themselves are also an important source of data, and you can use photo monitoring as a way to really track the progress of a restoration project. And it's a very visual, concrete way to see change as it happens. And as an example of that, Karen Beatty, who's here with us tonight, is starting to work with us to explore using the platform to get some of that photo monitoring data for the windswept bog online. So we've just imported all of these photo monitoring locations that are set up. And you can view these on the map, see where they are, and you'll soon be able to navigate through here and actually see the photos from different points in time. Another example of that is we work closely with Chris Neal, who sets up vegetation monitoring plots on many of these properties. So there are designated areas that he's regularly tracking, counting what plants are there. And this is an example of some of those from the from Foothills Preserve. So you can go on and browse through and see. So here was a particular plot in 2021. And then you can go see that same plot. I guess that was 2024, and then here's the same plot in 2021. Um, and that'll soon be on here for all of these different locations. You'll really have a lot of data to reference. And of course, in addition to the numeric data, there's a big human element to this. And as we talk to members of the community, as we talk amongst ourselves as researchers, people have things that they've observed that are really insightful, that are the wisdom that we can use to help develop wetland restoration as a practice, both in terms of how we have boots on the ground doing the work, but also how we interact with the public, how we teach other people about this. And to keep track of all of that on the platform, we took some inspiration from Alex Hackman, who had a spreadsheet that he was using to record people's insights. And we built that into a fairly powerful tool on here where people can go on and post their observations or other people's observations. And these can be quite simple. They can be as simple as a sentence with an observation, or they can go into more detail, include photos. These are, yeah, this so the insight here is that some of the most interesting footage we got was putting cameras where they're really close up to water and off the trail. And we had this great blue heron that one summer had a relationship ongoing with this camera where he would peck at it, or there's a lot of footage of the heron just sitting there beside the camera, looking out over the water and waiting for dinner to show up. Yeah, so we can have an observation like that, connect it to supporting media like that. We keep track of who made the observation, so they get credit. If I go to another one of these that has more people involved, you can see. We also noted that a lot of times it's not necessarily the person that's making the observation that's the best one to share it. And a lot of times we have insights and we don't realize that they're insightful. It's somebody else that does. So this system lets other people go in and be the reporters and capture other people's insights. Again, everything on here is very connected and hyperlinked, so things can be tied to a location. They're associated with a team of people, so you can choose to just share insights within your team if you're not ready to share it with the world yet. So there's really no friction to getting something documented in here. And then everything is tagged by subject area. So if I'm starting up a new project and I'm really curious about what other people have said about construction, I can click on this tag and see the other comments that are on here. So that might help me if I'm trying to do something around a particular subject. I want to see what other people have already suggested. And then lastly, I'll say that these insights are also discussion threads. So it's not just the initial insight. People can go on and continue to add their comments. So an insight can be based around a question that people respond to, or it can just be something where people contribute their input. And with that, I would like to hand it over to Adrian, who is going to talk about how we're using a lot of these tools to further our learning initiatives.
Hello. Get my bearings here. Okay. Well, so a little bit about me. I'm an ecologist by training, and I moved to this area to work for the UMass Cranberry Station. about 5 years ago. And so I spent 3 years working with the UMass Cranberry Station with a hydrologist named Casey Kennedy as a postdoc, and I was studying soil and water chemistry of active cranberry farms. Um, and there was a lot of projects also about restoring cranberry farms. And my background really is in wetlands, you know, the ones we're thinking about restoring, right? So I was very interested in what is Living Observatory? Who are the people behind this community that's interested in wetland restoration on cranberry farms? So uh, I feel privileged to be working with Brian and Glorianna now because they're extremely sharp, and I've just learned so much all the time working with them and the other folks who are involved with this community, such as Karen, who's in the room today. Um, so I'm going to kind of bring this back to the big picture about conservation in our area, and how we're working with organizations to monitor their activity, monitor their efforts, and try and help them function better and be more effective at getting projects in the pipeline, identify sites, work with landowners, and get these projects ultimately completed. So, as many of you know, I'm sure some of you in the room maybe have cranberry farming in your family, or at least know somebody who's grew up working on a cranberry farm or has one in their backyard. It's nested within this region. It's just part of the fabric. It's part of the culture. And my time at the UMass Cranberry Station has just exposed to me what a unique kind of lifestyle it is to grow cranberries, um, and what a unique community there is around that industry. So I think the industry has a lot going for it, and I think it'll be an important part of um, the community and the economy in this region moving forward. And that's why it's important that we're partnering with cranberry industry on these projects. So, but the reality is that farm acreage is declining, and there's a variety of reasons for why a farm might go out of production. There's, globalization. Farmer might be looking to retire, um, but either way, there's a compelling case to make to a landowner who has cranberry farm on their property for land conservation. So how much land are we talking about? It's about 13,000 acres of active farms. And there are at least 4 times as much of that land in the uplands surrounding those cranberries that are managed by those same landowners. So if we're talking about maybe 1,000 acres of active production going out of production, that could be 4,000 acres potential for conservation. So in terms of the conservation opportunity, we're talking about thousands of acres in important areas. These are connected to waterways, they're migration corridors for wildlife. They provide sort of globally valuable ecosystem services like storing carbon, sucking CO2 out of the atmosphere. Um, so it's really important that we're able to seize this opportunity and get as many of these sites that might go into conservation and into restoration done, now. Because if we don't, there could be another pathway for those lands. They could be developed, or they could sit fallow for a long period of time, and we wouldn't get the same habitat and wildlife quality out of those sites for a number of years. So, as Gloriana mentioned, our role is to connect, to observe, to share. We're a learning collaborative. We're a set of people who are interested in this, and we want to make it work better. Early days, we were focused on, the kinds of questions we would be asking would be, what practices should we apply on this site? How deep should we dig? Do we need to connect this channel here, or do we move it over there? What does success look like? How do we even measure it, right? And that work is still going on. But there's a growing body of best practices or common practices that you're seeing from site to site. There's been over a dozen sites restored now, and there's many more in the pipeline. And those sites that have been restored, they're starting to resemble natural functioning wetlands in many ways. So we're starting to see success in the early results here, in the early polling. So now the thing is, how do we actually restore many sites? As Glorianna mentioned, and Glorianna and Evan are, they participated in a restoration from the landowner perspective. And there are many stumbling blocks for a wetland restoration. It's really difficult to get one of these projects completed. We just this year, the Upper Coonamessett River restoration was completed, and this is a project that connects the Coonamessett River in Falmouth on Cape Cod. It connects Herring Passage now is uninterrupted from the estuary all the way up to the pond up at the headwaters. And that's something that they're very proud of. And but I was sitting at this ribbon cutting, and speakers come up, and you have politicians come up, and the different organizational leaders come up, and everyone was talking about how much work this was. It was so oh, we worked so hard, it was very difficult to do, etc. So how can we improve the pipeline? How can we improve the organizational processes to make these restorations easier? So just to do a restoration, you have to decide that you want to conserve the land. You need to find an organization that actually values your land, right? Then you need to forge partnerships, funding, contracts, design questions, right? Permit, build, etc. So enter the Making Spaces project. So we're now a collaborator on a project led by Mass Audubon. It's a project called Making Space, Restoring Cranberry Bogs for Salt Marsh Migration. And this is a grant funded by NOAA. And the goal of this project is to restore potentially hundreds of acres of low-lying cranberry bogs that reside in corridors for salt marsh migration. Now, if you look at a picture of this salt marsh here, this is some students climbing around the salt marsh in Plymouth and at the outlet at Eel River. You can see little pockets of things. It's collapsing, it's receding. There's erosion there. That marsh needs somewhere to go. Up there you have green lawns, there's development. So there's only a few places where there's an opportunity for these marshes to move inland. And there are quite a few cranberry bogs that are positioned in low-lying areas where they're starting to get salt water coming in. The farms won't be viable anymore. So this is an opportunity for conservation that's sort of a very regionally important conservation effort in conserving salt marshes, but it also connects to our focus of restoring cranberry bogs. So there are many aspects of this project. There's three main strategies that I'll read off. So they're prioritizing sites. They're making maps and looking at sites and saying, okay, is this a potential candidate? Is this a potential candidate? How do we rank these, right? They're also going to build and complete two projects. One of the projects is already completed. That was the Upper Coonamessett River. Now that stuff is all kind of, it's technical. These are things that we can solve if we put our heads down individually or working together, right? But the really unique and visionary part of this project is to try and build this network of partners that can provide a sustained effort on seeing the rest of these projects through. This grant is just going to restore 2 projects. How do we get the rest of the projects restored? So, how does our insights tool help? So, this is my daughter Darcy exploring the woods. I think everyone here understands the true value of, getting outside, right? So back to insights. It's the old adage, if a tree falls in a forest but no one's around to hear it, did it actually fall? Okay. Yeah, did it make a sound? So if you have an idea but never share it, what's it worth? But let's say you have that idea and you do share it with somebody, and then they go tell their friend about it. It can become a game of telephone. So it's you're not preserving the context. There's salient facts that get blurred, missing, distorted, right? And so the insights tool is really neat because it can preserve the context of the situation when you made that observation. So, if I go and tell Brian that I was out there and I was near this area and I saw a heron and it flew away, that's an anecdote. But when you take this, oh, actually, sorry, I have a better example. Because we've had a blizzard recently. Um, you know, right before extreme events, people tend to go to the store and buy water and toilet paper, right? So if I'm in the grocery store and I see the person in front of me is buying 2 bundles of toilet paper and a thing of bottled water, and I go, oh, I come home and tell my wife somebody was buying toilet paper and bottled water, things are bad. I better go fill up the generator. Like that's kind of silly, right? But if I'm able to say, okay, well, actually, everyone in all the lines were buying toilet paper. And actually, I went to the other store and the other store was out of toilet paper. There must be something going on. Maybe we should check the news, right? Um, so the insights tool helps us connect these little isolated bits of observation and detect patterns. We go from anecdote to evidence. So I'm excited about how we're using that. So we're beginning to use this and we're getting close to time, so I'm going to wrap this up. But we're beginning to use this tool to help coordinate organizational efforts. A lot of our early work and insights came from a place of familiarity. So Christine Hatch is a hydrologist. She's inclined to make an observation about water. Kelly Ahmad's a botanist. She's inclined to make an observation about plants. But, without an intentional focus on things that are unfamiliar to us, we're not going to tend to learn about those things. So this enters strategic learning. So when we first had the tool, the Insights tool, we presented it to the partners of the Making Space initiative, and we started typing in, oh, I think this about restoration or that about restoration. And we had a lot of great insights, but we were kind of like the dog that caught the car. Where are we actually going to drive this thing? Luckily, Alex and his colleagues who wrote the grant planned ahead for this, and they incorporated strategic learning. So this fall we spent some time. Andrea Jerbeck, who's a project manager on this, and I worked with learning consultant Carrie Nicole Dillman to develop a strategic learning plan for this project. And essentially what we did is we asked, what are the key missing pieces of information we need to reach the goals that we have? And, without intending to do so, the 4 things that we came up with all had to do with the human social components of the project rather than the technical aspects, like, where to put this ditch or how do we monitor that? It all had to do with multiple parties trying to make decisions. So kind of brings us back to it takes a village to get these projects done. As the cranberry bog restoration or the wetland efforts, sorry, the wetland restoration efforts on cranberry bogs have grown, our focus is kind of necessarily expanding to how organizations and programs work together, including, how individuals and sites respond to those restorations. So a lot of our role maintains the same. We want to connect with people. We want to monitor these sites. We want to share that information and interpret that information. But in addition to that, we're going from, how do we do a restoration to how do we get many restorations done? And, ultimately we work together, but we're using these tools developed by Brian, and we're working with these partners to apply them to, track our progress and make, strides, not steps. So with that, I will scroll to the end, and I really thank you for your time. It's been an honor to present to you. And just a reminder, we do have herring monitoring coming up. So if you would like to do some herring monitoring in a stream near you, please check it out or get in touch.
You want to just see if anyone has questions?
Yeah. Sure. Hi.
I'm Molly from Management Conservation Sciences. Do you have a way, it's kind of a data question, do you have a way to draw from large participatory science efforts like eBird or iNaturalist? It seems like that's sort of where you're headed as far as inviting a really broad range of insight, different types of observations, and those exist already and probably exist at your sites.
We're not doing it right now, except I think in the herring count we are. But and one of the issues with the herring count is it takes a lot of leadership to get enough volunteers to get enough data.
You might find a little eBird.
Mass Audubon actually really does more of that kind of programming. They're very involved in a firefly. Actually, maybe Danielle wants to speak to a fireflies counting.
There's a lot of different and butterfly one, yeah.
And eBird is obviously a fantastic example in the software business. Let me turn it over to somebody who knows software.
Yeah.
But we're not quite there, I think, yet in the restoration space. I mean, my big concern is that these properties are beautiful. They are open space. They have no housing on them. They don't have any blacktop on them, but they are ecologically very impaired. And so, in Plymouth, we just had this whole thing down in Ellisville with sand being taken out for some development. I mean, we're in that struggle with cranberry bogs now. If you've owned a cranberry bog, if it's been part of your family for years, but there's nobody taking it over to farm it, how do you get that return for your family?
Yeah, that's kind of the big question too, is what are the incentives for a retired cranberry farmer? Who has family members that are actually hoping that, they get some compensation from those acreages. And there is no there's no production anymore, so there's no compensation.
So,
And yet, they want to build houses or something to get something off of that, but the incentives are hard when there's no real public incentive to do that.
well, USDA has the Farm Bill. If the Farm Bill is passed again, which there's no guarantee it
Right.
will be, there's money in the Farm Bill to help farmers retire young. And that's why it's there. The state of Massachusetts has been fabulous. There's been a cranberry task force for rejuvenation of land. I was gonna talk about that, but that would have been a very long other talk. And there are various funds that are being released that are trying to encourage collaborative projects with multiple partners. Karen Gray has been involved in supporting people getting out, but if you're a farmer, you might not be offered the price you want for the land, and that is always the tricky business. But if there's no other option,
Do you know what the length of time is between, if the land is in agricultural zoning? The tax rate would change after so many years of not being farmed, is that correct? It's only 5 years?
5 years in Plymouth, but the other piece of it is if you put a USDA permanent easement on it, you cannot have that agricultural exemption that Plymouth has because the federal government does not allow any liens to be on the property and it's considered a lien. It's complicated, but
Yeah.
there are ways, and there are people who believe very strongly in conservation and open land. And for most of these programs, you can't take all that public money and have a private piece of land.
Correct.
So there is a trade-off in that piece, but the Buzzards Bay Coalition just put a huge piece of land into conservation. I think it's 1,300 acres.
Yeah.
Or maybe more than that.
They're trying to raise $140 million to fund land purchases, bog purchases and restoration. So if I were a cranberry farmer looking to leave my family something, I'd call Mark Rasmussen and the coalition for Buzzards Bay. He knows how to find money to buy them.
I mean, there are people who want to do that because they believe in land protection. It takes work. It took Ellen and me, and we made the decision. We knew around 2000 that we'd have to do something. By 2004, I was planning to leave MIT. I had to get PhDs out, so I didn't leave until 2008. It took us 3 years to negotiate with the USDA. Partly we were uncertain and partly it was difficult. But once we did that, there was a team of people who came and were helpful. I think it was enormously helpful that we were doing Living Observatory and that we had the MIT Media Lab working on the land and that the public could see cameras.
Absolutely.
But, I think Mass Audubon is taking huge steps now. Mass Audubon had never had a restoration property before they bought Tidmarsh. They now hired Alex Hackman who was working for the state and a little frustrated with the state bureaucracy to run a restoration program, and Making Space is his program. Or his grant made, but Mass Audubon is now very interested because getting to 30,000 acres in 2030.
So 30%
by 30.
protecting and expecting 30.
Yeah.
This is Danielle from Mass Audubon. She knows it all. But anyway, yes, I agree with you. It's hard, but it can be done.
No, and I think CCGA is actually helping in terms of through the Cranberry Growers Association.
But they joined this program, the NOAA, the Making Space, and part of it was that when Evan and I were doing it, CCGA was like not interested in restoration at all.
Lots happened in 20 years, huh?
Yeah. So other questions? There any questions from the online crowd? They all went away. Hear anything? Anyway.
We operate out of the Center Hill Preserve, as you know, and there's a retired ocean spray cranberry bog on the site that's on fallow and hasn't been restored in any way. In my naivete, I've been saying, oh, look at all the pitch pine exploding out of it, and thinking this was natural restoration, and just got an insight from you that in fact it's kind of what's happened because of what they did to make that bog and put the sand and bring in those seeds probably came from around where there were uplands. Nevertheless, when we were thinking initially, one of the projects we'd like to have, since this is on the property where we have the center, that we'd like to see, can we do what is the process to do a small bog restoration? And we're told basically by people that know, until I heard tonight some hope, that it's too expensive, that the proposition that can create yours is too expensive on a small bog basis.
Well,
the costs are too large.
Making space, one of the things that they're also working on, and they're working with CGA on that, is how can farmers who have the equipment, they have the knowledge, how can they do the restoration themselves? Could there be a set of sort of tabletop plants? And if you don't have a flow-through bog, so if you have a flow-through bog, you have a stream running through your bog, that brings up a lot of various regulatory issues, and also it's very hard to do the stream restoration. But we think on some of these smaller bogs, they can be restored by the farmer, and maybe there will be funding to pay the farmer.
Because this is one of the spring fed
The other thing I want to mention about Nantucket, windswept bogs, if you ever go over there, I would really recommend it, because we've learned so much since Tidmarsh was done. A beautiful restoration, and one of the things they suggested for that site was that there be depositional areas for the sand. So rather than try to just break up the cranberry mat and turn over the sand, they specify in this area we can build up the sand, and that allows you to clear off a lot of what could become the wetlands. Okay, but somehow you've got to get that sand. But you can maybe break it up, but then your water table is still too low.
Yeah, there's also a recent restoration in Kingston through the Inlu Fee program, and it's a small bog, Sanson's Brook. And Matt Pinella is the conservation agent who was helpful in getting that through Kingston. And so that's an example that's worth checking out.
But that's also a division of ecological restoration.
Right.
So
yeah.
And are you involved at all, or any of these organizations? We're about to have a big bog restoration in Plymouth where Century Law.
Yeah.
Finally got the money there, supposed to get the contracts.
Yep.
Soon.
Yes.
Are we all involved in that?
We are all involved in
That's
this.
And when I didn't hear that before, and we're doing some like promotional work, I'll be taking those photographs there from like 9 different locations over the course of the restoration.
We're actually doing an experiment. So one of the things we're working with the Division of Ecological Restoration, specifically on Century Bog, we're looking at microtopography. There are a lot of questions about how deep should microtopography be? Should we be doing it at all? It's a way of breaking up the sand and the cranberry mat and make a very roughened topography. And we will be doing some experiments with no microtopography, very shallow microtopography, deep microtopography, to just see how those come back and what plants and what the soil moisture in particular, will be doing soil moisture monitoring of those plots. But we have to learn, this is the big thing, you know. You do one restorate, there's no way to learn what happens if you don't do it. So you do one, you learn, and the next one all of a sudden is better because of that knowledge. And that's why we're trying at Living Observatory to make this one location. There are a lot of people who believe the data should be private. I'm not one of them. I mean, I understand privacy and everything, but the data that we're getting off these cranberry bog restorations, and including people's opinion. Karen Beatty is here. She was the lead on the Nantucket restoration. They did things on Nantucket that hadn't been done before. Did they work? So there's visual observation, there's sensor observation. And we need that because when we do century bog, maybe there'll be a similar thing. Maybe there'll be something we can extract from that, from the Nantucket experience, and move over to century. And then century will be better. Karen will feel not so good. There'll be a better. There's something better out there.
This was better because of all projects that came ahead of us.
Yeah, so, but that's what's exciting about this, because all of these bogs were built in a similar way. Well, Karen's been involved, actually, you're involved in the Gilmore bog.
The
Does
one
that,
we just purchased with the town, and I saw it on actually, on Beaver Dam Road.
and is that gonna be restored?
It is.
Yeah, well.
David has this way, it will be.
So you see, there. All the knowledge that went into Nantucket will all of a sudden be part of. These are some different things you could do there. We're starting to know the different contractors who work on this, so how do you pick a contract? Right, you know, well, there's history now. There's contractors who have done many, there's contractors that have done a few, but have done them very well. There are contractors who have only done a few, but are ready to do more. And of course, it depends on price, but it also, that experience is critically important to how you make judgments, because a lot of restoration, the judgments made in situ. You have a design plan, but then you figure out that actually the water isn't flowing how they thought the water was flowing.
Should there be, like, there are burn crews that are experienced with prescribed fires? You know how there are people are experienced now with prescribed fires, and there are very experienced burn crews.
Yeah.
They know how to do all the elements, they know to be, you know, careful of all different considerations of smoke and humidity and all this. And they go in and they're like a scientific operation more than they are a fire anyway. Should there be cranberry bog restorations? Existing crews that this is what they do. You know, if this is such a resource, with all this open space that could be utilized one way or another, we should be able to do this. We should be able to do this on a.
Well, there are, those groups are emerging, but there are also people that know the land. And so, for instance, at Tidmarsh, an important source for us was the guy who farmed it. Who would go around and say, this is really wet, this is gonna be a sinkhole if you try to do that. This is very dry. On Nantucket. Nantucket Conservation Group hires scientists, so they have a plant expert. And they have a turtle, I guess she's an ecologist that does lots of things. But they had people who could do those early studies to figure out what was so special. Were there endangered species? If there were endangered species, how do you work with those endangered species when you're disrupting the entire landscape? So anyway, it's fun. It's very fun, but it's very it's very much about learning from the project that we put through. And the more we can do that, you folks are here from Redbrook. So that's what is exciting. This is a lot of knowledge. Or more knowledge than we have. Anyway, I think we should thank all of you for coming and